What's up guys, my name is Ace, and today we're going to be going over all of the weapon balancing that took place with the Season 2 update in Modern Warfare 3's multiplayer. And there's quite a long list to get through here. Just keep in mind, I'm not covering the miscellaneous changes. I already covered that yesterday. So changes to idle sway, for instance, as well as health regeneration and a bunch of other like bug fixes and stuff. That was all covered yesterday. Today is just focusing on the weapon balancing. And starting it off with some general stuff, they decreased our melee lunge distance for all of the Modern Warfare 3 weapons to align with Modern Warfare 2 standards. And unfortunately, I didn't have the pre-patch data on this. I didn't realize they were even different pre-patch, but post-patch, I can show you guys here. With a standard weapon, your melee distance is going to be 1.5 meters after this update. Next, another thing I mentioned is they increased movement speeds of all Modern Warfare 2 weapons to align with Modern Warfare 3 standards. And this is quite a general change, so I'm not going to cover every single gun, but what I noticed is like none of the SMGs really changed at all. Also, with assault rifles, none of the sprint or base movement speed changed. However, all of the aim walking movement speeds were increased for Modern Warfare 2 assault rifles. So in general, we should just be seeing more parity when it comes to that. Then another thing they mentioned that unfortunately I didn't have any pre-patch footage for, and this is again a very general change that was made. They added gun kick control and recoil control benefits when in TAQ stance for all weapons in the game. So not just Modern Warfare 2 weapons, but all of them. And that's it for the general changes. Now let's get into the specifics with the individual weapons, and we're going to start it off with assault rifles. The first gun that was nerfed a little bit is the Holger 5.56. They slowed down the aim down sight speed from 260 milliseconds up to 270 milliseconds. Then with the MCW, they increased our aim down sight speed from 240 milliseconds up to 265 milliseconds, and they slowed our sprint speed down as well from 241 milliseconds up to 252 milliseconds. And this means we may have to revisit our MCW builds, especially for ranked play if we're really trying to optimize them. It's likely some adjustments are going to be in order for this, and that's something I may revisit after everything settles down and I cover all of the Season 2 content. Now, additionally with the MCW, with the Jak Raven kit specifically, they adjusted the damage profile a bit. Now, the first thing they did here, and probably the most notable thing, is previously we had to hit the upper torso or arms to get that bonus damage, whereas now that's going to apply to the entire torso and arms, so it's going to be a bit more forgiving there. On top of this, they slightly buffed the damage values in close quarter situations, which doesn't change the number of shots to kill to the body, but it makes it so now you only need to mix one headshot in with torso shots in order to reduce the number of shots to kill, and that applies now to the first 3 damage ranges, because they also boosted headshot damage in general. So some nice buffs there, but they also nerfed a couple of the damage values, and the most important thing that comes out of this part is in that 3rd damage range, it's now going to be a 7-shot kill to the body, whereas previously we could get a 6-shot kill as long as we were hitting that bonus zone. So that part is a slight nerf, but when we also look at the range buffs that we saw with the Jak Raven kit specifically, our new 6-shot kill potential is only slightly worse than the previous 6-shot kill potential, and keep in mind, within that previous 6-shot kill range, that 3rd damage range, we had to hit literally every bullet to the upper torso or arms, and just 1 shot to the stomach or legs would yield a 7-shot kill. So overall, when you combine all of this, this is definitely a net buff to our damage values with the Jak Raven kit. That's not all with this kit though. They also improved the recoil a little bit, actually by a noticeable margin while using the Jak Raven kit. You can see here the gap between especially those initial shots fired. It's a lot smaller post-patch compared to pre-patch. And on top of that, the total magnitude is reduced a little bit on that recoil. So this is going to be a bit more accurate than pre-patch. It's going to hit a little bit harder than pre-patch, and headshots are going to be a lot better. And then one last little thing they did here is when sliding specifically, pre-patch, our hipfire spread would increase a little bit while we slide, which is typically expected. Post-patch, it actually decreases slightly when sliding while using the Jak Raven kit. So definitely a good handful of buffs to this, and I would say this kit is going to be significantly more viable now compared to pre-patch, and you may want to give it a shot. Next, let's get into the battle rifle category, and the BAS-B saw some nerfs. The first thing is they slightly nerfed its aim down sight speed, so it's now 270 milliseconds, whereas it used to be 260 milliseconds. And our sprint out time was also nerfed by a noticeable margin. It's now 252 milliseconds. On top of that, they made our minimum hipfire spread, so while standing still, they made that hipfire spread noticeably worse post-patch with the BAS-B. So a few little nerfs with this gun that will slightly reduce its effectiveness, but at the end of the day, it's still going to be one of the best guns in the game. Next up, let's get into the Sidewinder, and the first thing they did here is they actually significantly improved our recoil on this, and this is the buff I was looking for previously with the Sidewinder. It's still not going to be the most accurate gun in the game, but as you can see there, especially with those initial shots fired, they're not bouncing around nearly as much, and therefore this is going to be much more manageable. On top of this, they buffed our bullet velocity a little bit on this from 540 meters per second up to 600 meters per second. So post-patch, I think the Sidewinder's finally starting to get to the place where I feel it belongs, and that's excellent news. But on top of this, with the Sidewinder's new kit, the Jak Thunder LMG kit, they mentioned they increase the delay before the accelerated fire rate begins to decay, as well as decrease the accelerated fire rate decay rate. I think this is if you're pausing between firing, because just looking at it pre-patch versus post-patch, I couldn't really tell a difference in the fire rate at all, even going frame by frame. However, the really big thing you'll notice with this Jak Thunder kit now is it is way more accurate than it used to be. Now, of course, it's still a pretty inaccurate gun. I definitely wouldn't call this accurate. But at the very least, we're not going to end up looking at the ceiling if we're trying to fire a full magazine of this, unlike pre-patch. But then finally, for battle rifles, the TAQ-V saw some very noticeable range buffs here. You can see our 4-shot kill range is nicely improved, so the TAQ-V should be a little bit more viable now. Now let's move on to the SMG category, and the Striker SMG saw a range buff to its 4-shot and 5-shot kill potential, although that 6-shot kill range didn't change at all. Next, with the AMR9 Jak Ettin kit, pre-patch there was a bug where you didn't get hipfire crosshairs. Post-patch that has now been fixed. Then with the WSP-9, we saw some very slight range improvements with our first 2 damage ranges. And on top of that, they improved the aim down sight time from 240 milliseconds down to 220 milliseconds. Additionally, with this gun, if you're using the 45 Broodmother kit, they first off improved our aim down sight speed from 270 milliseconds to 241 milliseconds, and then on top of that, they just reduced the movement speed penalties that this kit used to provide. You can see it used to hurt our movement speeds across the board, and now it just hurts our base movement speed a bit, as well as our tactical sprint movement speed. The rest are untouched. So that's it for SMGs. Now let's move on to the shotgun category. And the first thing here is with the Lockwood 680's Defender Heavy Long Barrel, which is probably the most common barrel with this gun. They made the sprint out time very noticeably worse. Pre-patch, it was 216 milliseconds while using this barrel. Post-patch, it's now 260 milliseconds. So that's a pretty big trade-off to using that barrel now. Then with the KV Broadside, we actually saw a couple buffs. Our aim down sight speed was significantly improved. It used to be 330 milliseconds. They cut that all the way down to 240 milliseconds. And on top of that, they improved our sprint out time nicely from 210 milliseconds down to 189. And that's it for shotguns. Now let's get into the LMG category, and the TAQ Eradicator surprisingly saw some nerfs. Our aim down sight speed was nerfed just by 10 milliseconds, so not a major difference, but there was a slight nerf there. And our sprint out time was noticeably nerfed from 210 milliseconds up to 252 milliseconds. Then we saw a few buffs to some of the Modern Warfare 2 LMGs. The first one is the RAAL MG. They very noticeably improved our aim down sight time down to 330 milliseconds, and our sprint out time was also noticeably improved down to 199 milliseconds. After that, we saw a bit of a buff to the 5.56 Icarus sprint out time from 250 milliseconds down to 235 milliseconds. And then finally for LMGs, the RPK saw a buff to its aim down sight time. Previously it was 410 milliseconds, now it's 380 milliseconds, so quite a noticeable buff there. And with that, we can move into the marksman rifle category. We saw quite a few changes here across both Modern Warfare 2 and Modern Warfare 3 marksman rifles. And let's start this off with the MCW 6.8, which unfortunately saw a very significant nerf to its damage ranges. This was an 18% nerf across the board, which is a bit surprising since I don't think this gun was overperforming. However, in order to compensate for that, we did see a very significant improvement to our aim down sight time. This is now 245 milliseconds, whereas it used to be 271 milliseconds. And then another adjustment they made here is they reduced our bullet velocity from 1016 meters per second down to 930 meters per second, which honestly, 930 meters per second is still an amazing bullet velocity in this game, and that's not likely to be a very noticeable nerf in the vast majority of gunfights you find yourself in. Now, on top of this with the MCW 6.8, they actually very noticeably improved our hipfire spread, both while standing as well as while moving. And therefore, overall, this gun was actually buffed if you're playing aggressively with it and keeping yourself at least reasonably close quarters. However, at longer ranges, you may notice it's slightly less effective. As for the next marksman rifle that was adjusted, this is the DM56, and quite surprisingly, they nerfed our damage values at medium and longer ranges. So up close and personal in that maximum damage range, this gun will perform exactly the same as it used to. But in the minimum damage range, previously we had a 3-shot kill potential as long as we shot them in the upper torso or arms, whereas post-patch, it's now going to be a 4-shot kill unless you're mixing in headshots. So I wouldn't say this is a massive nerf to this gun, but you may notice that it's just slightly less consistent in those longer range engagements. Next, the MTZ Interceptor saw several nerfs. Our aim down sight time was nerfed to 280 milliseconds, so it's going to be a bit slower. Same with our sprint out time, this was slightly nerfed as well. And most importantly, I would say, they very noticeably reduced our neck damage multiplier, so it's now equal to our upper torso. And this means we can no longer get a 1-shot kill to the neck, whereas previously we could. You have to hit them directly in the head now for that 1-shot kill. And that's it for the Modern Warfare 3 marksman rifles that were changed. However, several of the Modern Warfare 2 ones were also adjusted, and the first thing is with the LMS, they significantly improved our idle sway, and I'm going to show you idle sway after we've already been aiming down sight, so we're seeing the true idle sway and not just the changes that they made with the recent update, which I covered yesterday. And as we can see here, your idle sway is very noticeably improved on the LMS. Next, with the SPR-208, they nerfed the maximum damage range a little bit. However, they also extended the one-shot kill zone to also include anywhere from the elbow and up, whereas previously, arms wouldn't count at all. You had to hit them in the upper torso. So it's definitely a bit more forgiving with that one-shot kill, but the range is also noticeably reduced. And we saw that exact same trend with the Lockwood MK2. They reduced that maximum damage range, but they now made it so you can get a one-shot kill to the upper torso in that maximum damage range. Although at this point, you may as well be using a shotgun with how terrible that range value is. And then finally, we once again saw that same trend with the SAB-50. They reduced our maximum damage range, but we now have a one-shot kill potential anywhere from the upper torso as well as elbow and up. Now, let's move on to the sniper rifle category, and the first thing we saw here was actually a buff to the longbow. I was quite surprised to see that. They just improved the aim down sight speed from 550 milliseconds down to 520 milliseconds, and honestly, I do think that makes sense when looking at the other stats. It does have the worst one-hit kill potential out of the Modern Warfare 3 snipers, so it should also have the best aim down sight speed. Next, with the Signal 50, they actually significantly nerfed our maximum damage range, and within that range, this is where it's a one-shot kill anywhere in the torso or upper arms. Whereas anything beyond that, you have to hit upper torso and the arms don't count. So this is actually a fairly noticeable nerf to this gun. And then finally for snipers, the SPX-80 saw a nerf to the aim down sight time. Previously it was 521 milliseconds, which was insane for a gun that kills as consistently as this one does. Now it's 545 milliseconds, which honestly is still pretty quick for a sniper rifle in this game. Now let's move on to our secondary weapons. And we're going to start this off with the Renetti using the Jak Ferocity carbine kit. With this, they just made it so our movement speed penalties aren't nearly as punishing. They actually cut those penalties effectively in half in most cases. And that's good news. This is actually one of the reasons that I stopped using that. I just felt that I didn't get that mobility boost that I was hoping for while having a secondary weapon in my hands. And then after that, we saw some adjustments to the range values on the Basilisk. The first thing they did is our one-shot kill potential has been increased from 6.9 meters up to 8.4 meters. And then all of our other damage range drop-offs were very noticeably buffed as well. And there we go, that wraps it up for all of the individual guns that were changed with this update. However, there were also a bunch of melee adjustments here, and basically most of the melee weapons saw a noticeable nerf to their lunge range potential. And with this, with the karambit, the combat knife, the dual kodachis, and the gutter knife, pre-patch, they all had a lunge range of 2.3 meters. Post-patch, this has been cut all the way down to 1.6 meters, so that's quite noticeable. Then with the dual commas, this was 2.5 meters pre-patch, now it's 1.8 meters. And then finally with the pickaxe, this went from 2.8 meters down to 2 meters, which was a very, very noticeable reduction there. So in general, these melee weapons are going to be quite noticeably worse post-patch. And then the last thing I want to cover here was an adjustment to the Jak BFB muzzle. They actually nerfed this muzzle in several ways. Now, the first thing is they added an additional penalty to your aim down sight speed, your sprint out speed, and your aim walking speed, so it's going to be a bit more harsh in those areas. And then on top of this, they decreased the amount of recoil benefit that you gain. Now, I just use the HRM9 as an example here, but this applies to all of the guns. And with this, it was honestly a very slight nerf. Like, your gun kick control went from plus 60% down to plus 55%. That's still by far the best out of any single attachment in this game. Our vertical recoil control also went from a 40% boost down to a 35% boost. Again, still amazing in that category. And then finally, another thing they did with the Jak BFB muzzle is they introduced a bullet velocity penalty. So it reduces our bullet velocity by 18%, whereas previously it didn't touch our bullet velocity at all. So overall, still definitely going to be your best option as far as getting maximum recoil control with a single attachment, but it's just going to be not quite as amazing as it was pre-patch. And with that, that's pretty much it as far as weapon balancing goes. I'll just quickly mention again, since I mentioned this yesterday, but it may apply to this video as well. They did fix the Stormender launcher, so it now works against all of the streaks properly, and therefore you can once again destroy cruise missiles with it, and we can once again disable VTOLs, chopper gunners, and Wheelsons, for instance. And there we go, that's finally going to wrap it up for all of the weapon balancing that took place with the Season 2 update. Overall, I've got to say many of these changes were very minor changes. I don't think the meta really got shaken up a whole lot here. I think one of the biggest things is that Jak Raven kit on the MCW. That really saw some nice boosts, and I think that's going to be a lot better post-patch compared to pre-patch. And then on top of that, like I said, I think we're going to have to make some adjustments to some of our MCW builds because it's still going to be one of the best guns in the game. It's just that we'll probably have to revisit our attachment selection a bit, especially if we're trying to optimize for ranked play. Now with that, I'm really curious to hear from you guys in those comments down below. How are you feeling about the Season 2 update? Now that we've actually got some time to play with it, how are you guys feeling about the weapon balancing and any other changes that they made with Season 2? If you enjoyed the video, a like rating is always appreciated, and don't forget to subscribe for more if you haven't already. I'll talk to you guys next time.